What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. So we're embracing the nerdy here on the channel. I've kind of been just accepting my role and my content style here and going, you know what? If you build it, they will come. If you get the reference, throw it in the comment section below. That's old. I don't even like really what the reference is from, but you know. I feel like my audience age will definitely know that reference. So anyway, what I wanted to start here was a series of videos where I kind of break down what makes a good open world questing, leveling, world questing build, the kind of ones that I tend to emphasize first, right? Before I get into anything more in detail. And I want to kind of explain the reasonings for like why I think abilities with cooldowns over X amount of time, or, odd niche things, or, I want to explain why all that stuff, I'll say, oh, that's bad, I don't want that, I don't want this. Even though if you were to ask a raider or someone who runs dungeons or someone who's hardcore and min-maxes their class, they will tell you that ability is good. And even when I make a guide focused on actually tanking in a dungeon or playing in a dungeon or something like that, I'll tell you that ability is good. I wanted to create a series where we kind of talk about some of the reasons that I don't think that those same rules apply when you're just trying to go out there and level your character or run quests or not play in a dungeon or a raid or PvP. So we're gonna get pretty nerdy with it here today, and we're gonna break out something fun here. Microsoft Paint. Okay, we're gonna go all paint mode here. I'm channeling the spirit of Asmongold in making a paint a paint graph. Here is what we're gonna do. So we're gonna make a couple of squiggly lines here, and then what we want to do is we're gonna make some circles. So we're gonna have a little blue one. Oh, and then we're gonna do a bigger green one, and then a bigger orange one, and then the biggest red one. Okay, and then over here we're gonna have questing. We're gonna make this black, and we're gonna make the size way bigger. All right, so we're gonna do questing. We're gonna do dungeons. We're gonna do raids. And then we're gonna do mythic raids, basically. Okay? So, here's what I want to talk about in this video. I want to talk about circles versus content. Okay, so we're going to need to talk about what these are. So we're going to put up here. We're going to make this a little smaller. And this is going to be tiny mob. Okay? This one is going to be normal mob. This one is going to be rare and elite. And then this one is going to be a boss. Okay? Now, when you are in a dungeon, you very, very occasionally will have, we're going to switch over to the pencil for this. You're going to have a low amount of tiny mobs. You're going to have a low amount of normal mobs. You're going to have a ton of rares and elites, a ton of them, all right? Almost every single thing that you fight is an elite, okay? And then you're also going to spend a lot of time on bosses, right? Usually you're going to have like 3 or something like that, a good amount of bosses. In the raids, you're almost never gonna have tiny mobs. Alright? You very rarely have normal mobs. You have a ton of elites again. Right? But maybe you have a little more bosses. I'm just making up numbers here to demonstrate. And then you got way more bosses, okay? So you might have, you know, 8 different bosses. And then in mythic raids, it's basically going to be the same, except you shouldn't have any real normal mobs. You're going to have a bunch of rares and elites, right? And then I would argue that you're going to have just as many bosses, but you're going to spend more time on them. Okay? Now, when you're questing, you'll have an okay amount of tiny mobs, right? You're going to have groups of bees, groups of little dragons, groups of things that you have to fight. And then you're going to have normal mobs. You're going to have all the normal mobs, okay? This number is just huge. And then occasionally you might have a rare or an elite that you'll find. We'll go so far as to maybe even give them a 5. And then bosses, what, 1? 1 boss? Maybe you do a world boss, like a weekly world boss or something like that, and you're always in a huge group that can just pug that boss anyway. So, if you look at the distribution of the types of enemies that you're fighting here in this different types of content, it's easy, in my opinion, to see how the distribution of what you're fighting can change what makes a ability good versus bad. Okay, because there's also a difficulty level and a time investment. If you look at mythics, difficult. If you look at raids, the bosses are difficult. Okay, if you look at like your normal raid enemies, they're like pretty decent. Your dungeon bosses, pretty decent. Okay, if we go into your rares and your elites, then we're talking, you know, these are all kind of like, they're not insane, but they're not that hard. Okay, then we get into the raid normal mobs, the dungeon normal mobs, the dungeon tiny mobs, the normal mobs in the world, the questing tiny mobs. Like, these are all pretty easy. So if you're looking at something like a mythic raid, and you look at the quantity of rares and elites that are there, the quantity of bosses, and the difficulty of those creatures, then it's easy to understand, in my opinion, that it's going to take you longer to defeat these things. You may get on a mythic boss, and who knows, it could take you 12 minutes to kill this mythic boss. 12 minutes. In 12 minutes, you have the opportunity to use an ability with a 5-minute cooldown 2.5 times. So that ability becomes something that you actually can use to maximize your DPS and to turn your character into this just machine that's just upping the damage or has big cooldowns to help an entire raid recover. If you're in a regular raid, that same applies to bosses, but on the rares and elites, you know, because it takes you, let's say it takes you 5 minutes to clear an elite pack in a raid. Well, all of a sudden, that ability that has a 5-minute cooldown can be used every pack. Or that ability that has a 2 or 3 minute cooldown can be used twice. And you're getting to use it continuously over and over, and there's basically no downtime where you can't hit the button and use the ability. All right, if you go into your dungeons, maybe when you're on that boss, that 5-minute ability becomes something that you use every boss just because you can, but maybe you're going fast enough that you get to the next boss and it's still on cooldown, like depending on the dungeon. So all of a sudden in this territory, your 3-minute cooldowns, your 2-minute cooldowns, those become really valuable because you can use those on every boss, or maybe you could use them 2 or 3 times on every boss. But all of a sudden the 5-minute ability is something that maybe you only get to use once per boss, and you don't want to use it in between bosses because you want to have it for the boss, right? So you're holding it. until you get to the boss, and then you use it. It all depends on the speed of your group and everything. That's going to change things. But then when you look at the questing content, there's no scenario, really, where all of a sudden you're spending a lot of time working on a single enemy. The closest you get to that is a world boss or a rare or an elite. So maybe you're going to go fight a rare and you're going to try to solo it. Okay, and that's another big thing. You're going to solo the rare without any help. Then maybe in that scenario, all of a sudden you can use your 3-minute cooldowns. You could use your 5-minute cooldown because you know you're not going to fight another rare for 15 minutes and it'll be off cooldown again. But that's the only scenario where those abilities really make sense, where it feels like you need those abilities. Okay, so look at the bulk of where your time is spent on this graph, right? You're spending all your time in mythics on bosses and rares. You're spending all your time in raids on bosses and rares. You're spending all your time in dungeons on bosses and rares. Or, sorry, not rares, elites. You're spending all your time questing on normal enemies, just regular enemies. 95% of what you are fighting against when you're questing and leveling is just normal enemies, not elites, not bosses, not special things. So when I look at an ability, I look at this. This is where the majority of my time is going to be spent when I am questing and leveling. So what things are going to help me with this chunk of stuff that I am doing? Okay, because what I want to do is maximize how fast I can get through this stuff. And a cooldown that takes 5 minutes is not really going to help me get through this stuff faster regularly. It'll help me get through stuff faster in like a burst window. Like I hit that 5-minute cooldown, and now all of a sudden, you know, I can kill 8 things in the time it takes to kill 3. But I can only do that every 5 minutes. Whereas something that has a 1-minute cooldown, maybe it doesn't let me kill 8 things in the time that I can kill 3, but it lets me kill 5 things in the time that I can kill 3. But I can use it every minute. So 2 extra enemies across those 5 minutes, that's 10 extra enemies that I've killed versus the 5 extra enemies I could have killed with that 5-minute cooldown ability. Does that make sense? So that's why a lot of times when I'm approaching the builds that I'm creating here, I look at it from this perspective of what is going to let me maximize my damage output and my flow from one regular enemy to the next, or one group of, 1 to 5 regular enemies to the next, because that's 99% of what I'm going to be doing. And occasionally I'll have to go fight a rare or an elite. Now let me give you something that's super cool about Shadowlands. Or not Shadowlands, Dragonflight. Okay, if they keep it, they have removed needing to be in a resting area to change your talent build. You can swap your talents and your talent build anywhere. There's just a small cooldown before you can do it. So now, even more so than before, I think it really makes sense to have a build that works best for this area of content 90% of the time, because when you're getting ready to pull in a rare or an elite to fight it solo, you could switch to a talent build specifically designed for that, and then switch back over to this when you're done. You don't have to go back to town. You don't have to spend a tome. You just switch. So this is the reason that you'll see me look at things that either have a long cooldown or make you stay in one place and like do a specific thing really, really well without any mistakes. And you'll see me just write them off as not that great when it comes to this type of content. It's because, yes, those abilities and things are great. They are great in this type of content. But in this type, you just don't get the same value out of them. And it's the same thing when it comes to tanks and it comes to healers. I don't need big tanking defensive abilities to handle normal enemies. I'm a tank. I'm already tanky. And I still am naturally going to have some added defense or low cooldown abilities that I can use if I need to have some extra survivability. So I don't need to take those big abilities that are good in this content because it's just not necessary. And the same thing for a healer. I don't need to emphasize my healing or take big healing cooldowns to heal the damage that these guys do. Because the default healing I have and what I have to pick up along the way while I'm looking for other things that can help me is going to be enough to handle just about anything that you can get yourself into in this type of a context. But if I'm over here, then I absolutely, for this content, I absolutely want to take those big abilities because you're going to get hit by a big, huge boss ability where you have to recover 8 people, super quick. That's not going to happen with a normal, pirate enemy out in the open world. So I don't take those abilities. So I wanted to try in this video just to break down nerdy, football playbook style, Microsoft Paint style, part of the logic behind what goes into creating these builds for me and why I write certain abilities off. There may be an ability that it totally sucks when you're fighting a boss. A good example of this is Firestarter in Mage. So Mage has an ability, a talent that you can take called Firestarter. And it makes it so that when your target is above 90% health, you always get a crit on a fireball or a pyroblast, I believe. Okay, so if you hit a normal enemy with a crit fireball or pyroblast, it's the first thing you cast. They're going to be over 90%. And that's probably going to take them down to 70, 60, 50% health. You clean them up, you go to the next enemy, you hit them, you get another big crit. So you get a crit, because you are moving from enemy to enemy to enemy so fast. If you're fighting a raid boss, it may take you 2 minutes to get them below 90% health. And then for the next 8 minutes, you're fighting them below 90% health, and Firestarter absolutely sucks because it does nothing. And so people will tell you that Firestarter is not a good talent because of that. Because 80% of the time you're fighting a boss, or actually 90% of the time you're fighting a boss, it does nothing. But on every single enemy you fight when you're questing, it guarantees a crit on your opening spell, which you could follow up with another guaranteed crit ability to get your free cast, instant cast, pyroblast, and you're just cleaning things up left and right. So let me know if you like this video. Let me know what you think about this style of video. Let me know if you think I should continue to kind of explain the logic behind these builds and what goes into them. This is something totally new on the channel, so I just want to see what you think about it. And we'll go from there. As always with this, I'm trying to help you guys understand, have the foundation to understanding so that you can take what goes into creating a build and adapt it to your own needs, right? So if you say, you know what, well, yeah, I am gonna go questing, but I intend to just mainly go chase after rares, right? You're done questing, you're max level, you got flying, you're going around and you're just rare camping or hunting rares. Then okay, well, I can tweak some of these abilities because now I'm in this area where I am fighting these enemies where it makes sense to have these abilities that I get to use every time, because I know from rare to rare there's going to be 3 or 4 minutes in between, and I can use these every single time. So let me know what you think about this video. Like I said, something totally different on the channel. Let me know if you totally disagree with my logic here, or you think I didn't explain it well. Did I use too much red? Were things not big enough, thick enough? Pause. let me know so I can, you know, improve future videos like this. All right, you guys, thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you on the next one.